On a distant planet far beyond the stars known to humans, a small alien community struggled to survive. Their world had once been full of life, with oceans that sparkled in the sunlight and forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. But over time, storms became fiercer, the skies darker and the land harder to live on. Crops failed again and again. Water grew scarce, and the creatures who had once shared the planet with them either left or disappeared. Each day was a challenge, and every moment carried uncertainty. The aliens, though small in number, were intelligent and kind-hearted, and they worked together to find solutions to their growing problems. In the heart of their settlement, leaders gathered in a circular chamber, carved from a rock that had survived centuries. They spoke in low tones, each voice carrying worry and fear. The air was heavy with the weight of their decisions. They had tried everything within their abilities, clearing the polluted waters, planting new crops, and even inventing machines to protect their homes from storms. But nothing seemed to help. The planet itself seemed to be fighting against them. Their hearts sank each day as they realized that without help, their community might not survive the next few seasons. One night, under a sky filled with pale green stars, the council made a decision. They would send a signal beyond their planet, reaching out into the vast universe for help. This was not an easy choice. Their ancestors had warned them about the dangers of contacting unknown civilizations, about creatures who might not be friendly. But desperation had grown stronger than fear. They gathered around a glowing device, a communication instrument built from rare minerals found only in the deepest caverns. Carefully, they encoded their message, explaining their situation, their failing world, their suffering, and their hope for assistance. The aliens worked for hours, making sure every detail of their message was clear and honest. They knew that the beings who received it might have different ways of thinking, different rules, and different ideas about life. They wanted to make sure that no misunderstanding could turn their plea for help into disaster. The signal was sent, in a steady pulse, a rhythm designed to travel across light years, reaching out to anyone who might listen. Once the message was finally released into space, the aliens waited. They watched the stars each night, hoping to see a sign of response, and yet fearing what might arrive. Days turned into weeks, and anxiety grew among the alien community. Children no longer played freely under the gray sky, instead staying close to their parents. Elderly aliens walked slowly through the settlement, their faces lined with worry, reminding everyone that time was running out. Despite the fear, a quiet hope began to grow. Perhaps somewhere in the darkness someone would hear them. Perhaps someone would answer. The aliens shared stories each night about civilizations they imagined might live among the stars, creatures who were kind, who understood struggle, and who would come to their aid. These stories kept their spirits alive and reminded them of why they were reaching out in the first place. One evening, a young alien named Ryle watched the sky and whispered a wish. He had never been part of the council, but he felt deeply the pain and hope of his people. "I hope they hear us," he said softly. His friend, a small alien named Vera, held his hand and nodded. "If someone comes," she said, "we must be ready to welcome them with open hearts." Even in the face of fear, their innocence and belief in kindness remained strong. This belief, however, would soon be tested in ways they could not imagine. The first signs of response were subtle. Strange flashes of light appeared on the horizon far beyond the settlement. Some aliens thought it was a natural phenomenon, a storm or a reflection of the dying sun. Others, however, recognized patterns. In the lights, rhythms that matched the pulses of their message. Excitement and fear mixed in equal measure. Leaders gathered once again, debating whether these lights were indeed a reply or merely illusions. Still, hope could not be ignored. Supplies were gathered, shelters were prepared, and teams were organized to meet the visitors if they arrived. Every preparation was made carefully, but uncertainty filled the air. As the days passed, the aliens could see more signs that something, or someone, was approaching. Ships unlike any they had ever imagined appeared as tiny specks against the dark sky. The community watched silently, hearts pounding. Some aliens whispered prayers, others held hands, and the youngest ones simply stared in awe. For the first time in months, a feeling of relief washed over them. Perhaps their prayers had been answered. Perhaps help had arrived. They did not yet know the nature of the beings who were coming, only that the universe had heard their cries. Among the alien council, older members spoke of caution. "Not all who answer a call for help bring kindness," one elder warned. "We must watch carefully and prepare for any outcome." Younger members, filled with excitement and hope, disagreed. "We cannot live in fear forever," said one. "If this is the help we prayed for, we must trust it will do good." The tension between hope and fear filled the settlement. But despite their worries, every alien could feel that a moment of change had arrived. Their world, once quiet and hopeless, now held the possibility of rescue, even if it came with unknown risks. As the first visitors drew closer, the aliens felt a mix of emotions: wonder, relief, and unease. Their small community, facing the collapse of everything they knew, had sent a message across the stars, and the universe had responded. They were about to meet beings from another world, beings whose intentions were yet unknown. The nights grew brighter with approaching lights, the winds carried new sounds, and every heart in the settlement beat faster with anticipation. The aliens, though still fragile and fearful, were united in one thought: help had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alien community had waited for weeks, eyes fixed on the horizon, hearts filled with hope and fear. Then one morning, something extraordinary happened. Tiny specks of light in the sky began to grow larger, moving slowly and steadily toward their planet. At first, the aliens thought it might be a storm or some unusual phenomenon, but soon it became clear that these were not clouds or natural lights. They were ships, unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Sleek, shimmering, and enormous, they floated in the sky with a quiet majesty that made even the oldest aliens stop in awe. Excitement spread quickly through the settlement. Messages were sent from the council to every corner of the community, instructing everyone to prepare for the visitors. Shelters were cleaned, food supplies organized, and medical stations readied, just in case help was needed. Some aliens felt nervous. After all, no one knew whether the beings approaching were friendly or dangerous. But the overwhelming feeling was hope, a hope so strong that it made even the most anxious hearts beat faster. As the ships descended, the aliens could see them more clearly. Their surfaces reflected the dim sunlight, creating patterns that shimmered like liquid metal. They made no noise at first, only floating gracefully above the settlement. A small group of scouts was sent forward to greet them, carrying gifts of food, water, and simple tools, a sign of trust and welcome. Among the scouts was Real, the young alien who had whispered his wish to the stars weeks ago. He walked carefully, trying to appear calm, though inside he was trembling with anticipation. Beside him, Vera held a small bundle of fruits and crystals, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and nervousness. The first visitors stepped out, or at least the aliens believed they did. The beings were taller than the aliens, with slender frames and smooth, shining skin that reflected the light of the dying sun. Their eyes glowed faintly, and they moved with a quiet grace. At first, they made gestures that seemed friendly, raising their hands in greeting, tilting their heads in curiosity, and offering small tools in return. The aliens stared in disbelief. They had imagined help coming, but never had they dreamed it would be like this. Communication began slowly. The visitors had a way of speaking that was not through words, at least not as the aliens understood them. Instead, they used patterns of light, gestures, and sounds that resonated with the aliens' senses. It was difficult at first to understand each other, but both sides tried patiently. Ril and Vera, along with other scouts, guided the visitors through the settlement, showing them the damaged homes, the failing fields, and the sick animals. They explained, as best as they could, the struggles of their people and their planet. The visitors seemed to listen carefully, tilting their heads and flickering lights in a rhythmic way. The aliens took this as a sign of understanding, and hope grew even stronger. The elders whispered to each other, saying that perhaps these beings were the answer to their prayers. They watched as the visitors examined the water sources, the plants and the homes. Occasionally, they would adjust something, moving a rock here or opening a water channel there. Nothing destructive, nothing harmful, at least not yet. However, as the hours passed, a few subtle details began to make some aliens uneasy. The visitors would glance at the settlement in ways that felt more like observation than care. Their movements were too smooth, too calculated, almost as if they were testing the limits of the land and the creatures who lived there. Strange sounds, faint but constant, came from the ships vibrating through the ground and air. Some aliens noticed that animals reacted nervously, hiding or running whenever the visitors were near. Real noticed these things too, but pushed the thoughts aside, telling himself that perhaps it was just a part of how they communicated or explored. The days passed, and the visitors continued to study the settlement. They offered tools and machines that could help repair damaged buildings and purify water. The aliens accepted them gratefully, their relief growing. Children cautiously approached, and the visitors' gentle gestures reassured them. Slowly, a bond seemed to form between the aliens and the newcomers. Meals were shared, and the visitors observed alien customs, attempting to mimic simple greetings and rituals. At night, the settlement felt alive with possibility for the first time in months. Still, not everyone was fully convinced. The elder, who had warned against trusting unknown beings, watched quietly from a distance. "They may seem kind," he said to a young member of the council, "but appearances can deceive. We must be careful. We do not yet understand what has truly arrived." The young alien nodded, torn between awe at the visitors and concern over the subtle warnings. The community remained optimistic, but a small seed of caution had taken root. Then, one afternoon, a small group of visitors explored a section of the planet's outskirts. They touched rocks, examined plant life, and even observed the sky in ways the aliens could not fully comprehend. What worried some of the scouts was how easily the visitors navigated the terrain, as if they knew the planet's secrets already. Nothing harmful happened, but the aliens couldn't help but feel a strange tension. Every friendly gesture was now accompanied by the nagging question, did they truly come to help or did they have another purpose? Despite this unease, the visitors continued to work alongside the aliens, helping repair homes and providing knowledge that could improve life on the planet. Slowly, the alien community began to rebuild some of their old routines. Children laughed again as they ran through repaired fields, and families shared meals without worrying about immediate survival. For a brief moment, it seemed as though their prayers had been answered. The universe had heard their cries and help had come in a dazzling form. But even in this time of relief, shadows lingered. Some animals remained restless, and certain corners of the settlement seemed to provoke the visitors' intense observation. Rill noticed it too, staring at the horizon as the sun set, wondering what the lights from the visitors' ships really meant. Vera whispered, "Do you think they are truly here to help?" Rill hesitated, unsure. "I want to believe they are," he said softly. "But something about them, I cannot be sure." As night fell, the settlement glowed with the lights of both the aliens' homes and the visitors' ships. A sense of fragile hope filled the air, mixed with subtle unease. The aliens had received help in the form of beings from another world, beings more powerful and advanced than they could have imagined. They had been given tools, knowledge, and care. But at the edge of their minds, a quiet question lingered. Could something so extraordinary truly be entirely good? The first days of contact ended with cautious optimism. The aliens slept with a sense of relief they hadn't felt in months, unaware that the reality of their visitors' presence would soon reveal challenges far greater than anything they had faced before. They had reached out into the universe and received a response, but whether it was salvation or danger remained unknown. The community, united in hope, prepared for the days ahead, not yet realizing that their true test had only just begun. At first, the alien community thought that their visitors were truly here to help. Days had passed, and the settlement had begun to regain some of its former life. Water channels flowed more smoothly, homes were repaired, and children laughed as they explored the fields that were once barren. Yet subtle signs began to appear. small moments that made the elders uneasy. Shadows moved in ways that did not seem natural. Objects shifted without explanation, and the visitors' glowing eyes often lingered too long on the weakest areas of the settlement. Some aliens tried to dismiss these signs, but a quiet tension began to grow in the hearts of the cautious. One morning, the visitors called a meeting in the main chamber of the settlement. Their movements were precise, deliberate, and unlike anything the aliens had seen. The visitors spoke through patterns of light and sound, gestures that seemed simple but carried a heavy weight. The elders noticed that the visitors were no longer just observing, they were commanding, making decisions that affected the settlement without consulting the community. At first, the aliens tried to cooperate, trusting in the goodwill that had brought these beings to them. But a creeping unease began to take hold. Rill, who had been one of the scouts guiding the visitors, noticed something alarming. The visitors had begun to rearrange homes and crops, not in ways that repaired them, but in ways that created obstacles and strange paths. Animals grew restless and wary, hiding in corners of the settlement they had never avoided before. Rill tried to warn the council, but many dismissed his observations. "They are only trying to organize things," one elder said. "We should trust them, they are here to help." Yet Rill could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the days went on, the visitors' true nature began to emerge. They did not speak of kindness or care. They spoke of strength, survival, and challenge. Areas that were once safe became difficult to traverse. Paths were blocked with obstacles that seemed designed to test the aliens' agility, intelligence, and courage. Machines appeared that monitored the aliens' every movement, silently recording their responses to the new environment. Some young aliens laughed at first, treating it as a game, but laughter quickly faded as the tasks grew harder and more dangerous. The elders convened again, this time in urgent secrecy. "These beings are not here to save us," one said, his voice trembling. "They are here to see what we can endure." The council realized that their initial hope had been mistaken. They had called for help, and instead beings from another world had arrived who valued challenge and chaos above all else. Fear spread through the community like wildfire. Parents clutched their children, and even the bravest scouts felt their courage falter. They had trusted the visitors, and now that trust seemed misplaced. Rill and Vera took it upon themselves to explore the perimeter of the settlement, trying to understand what the visitors were capable of. They observed the machines and obstacles, noting patterns and weaknesses. What they saw was frightening. The visitors were not cruel in a simple way, but they were indifferent to suffering. Every challenge, every obstacle was designed to test limits, to see which aliens could adapt and which could not. The settlement, once a place of community and safety, was now a vast experiment in endurance. Attempts to negotiate with the visitors proved useless. Every gesture of diplomacy was met with observation and analysis, not understanding or empathy. The visitors did not respond to pleas or explanations. They were calm, precise, and entirely focused on their own purpose. Slowly, the aliens realized that their chance of survival would depend not on outside help, but on their own courage, intelligence, and cooperation. The reality of their situation sank in. The universe had answered their cry, but not in the way they had imagined. The first real danger appeared when the visitors introduced the first trial. A section of the settlement was suddenly filled with moving platforms, rising water, and shifting rocks. The aliens had to navigate this area to access food and water. Failure to cross meant hunger or dehydration. Panic spread quickly as the first small groups attempted the trial. Some succeeded, finding hidden reserves and paths that led to safety. Others faltered, caught in the moving obstacles, and were forced to retreat. The sight of these trials frightened the community, and hope began to mingle with dread. Rill and Vera became leaders among the younger aliens, guiding groups through the challenges. They discovered that teamwork, observation, and careful timing were the keys to survival. Each obstacle was a lesson. Watch carefully, move deliberately, and never underestimate the unknown. The aliens learned to help one another in ways they never had before, relying on courage, quick thinking, and trust. Even in fear, bonds grew stronger. and the community slowly adapted to the new, harsh reality imposed by the visitors. Meanwhile, the elders worked on strategies to protect the most vulnerable members of the settlement. They established safe zones and prepared escape routes, ensuring that no one would be left behind. Even as the visitors continued to observe, challenge, and test, the aliens refused to give up. They learned that survival was not about waiting for rescue. It was about adapting, learning, and working together. The settlement transformed from a place of despair into a place of determination and resilience. Despite their growing skills, the aliens could not ignore the emotional toll. Fear, anxiety, and exhaustion weighed heavily on every heart. Some young aliens struggled to cope, questioning whether they would ever see their old, peaceful world again. Parents worried constantly for their children, and even the strongest among the council feared failure. Yet through it all, small moments of courage, kindness, and clever thinking reminded them that they could endure even the harshest trials. One evening, as the sun set behind jagged mountains, Rio looked at the Sci-Fi visitors' ships hovering above the settlement. He realized that these beings whom they had first welcomed with hope were not enemies in a traditional sense. They were not seeking to destroy the aliens out of malice. They simply had a different way of seeing the universe, one where survival and challenge were the highest values. Understanding this did not make the situation less dangerous, but it allowed Rio to plan. If the aliens could learn the rules of this new world, they could survive and even thrive. Vera joined him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "We cannot stop them," she said softly. "But we can learn from them and we can protect each other." Rio nodded, feeling a renewed determination. The aliens' struggle was no longer just about hope for rescue. It was about courage, unity, and adaptation. The challenges ahead were dangerous, but they were not impossible. They had already begun to grow stronger, faster, and wiser than they had ever been before. By the end of the third week, the settlement had transformed. Paths were cleared, obstacles learned, and small victories celebrated quietly. The visitors continued to watch, seemingly indifferent to the aliens' progress. Yet the community had learned a vital truth. Survival depended not on external aid, but on their own actions. Each day brought new trials, new lessons, and new opportunities to grow stronger. The aliens, once helpless and afraid, now faced their unknown future with courage and determination, even as the visitors' presence loomed ever closer. The first, real understanding of the Deathworlders' nature had come at a high cost. Fear, tension, and the strain of constant challenge had tested every heart and mind. But in facing this danger, the aliens discovered something unexpected: their own resilience, the power of unity, and the ability to adapt in ways they had never imagined. Though they did not yet know the full extent of what lay ahead, one thing was certain: their lives had changed forever, and survival would require every ounce of skill, courage, and intelligence they possessed. The aliens had now spent several weeks living under the shadow of the Deathworlders. Every day brought new trials, obstacles, and challenges that tested not just their bodies, but their minds and hearts. The settlement, once quiet and peaceful, had transformed into a landscape of constant movement and careful planning. Paths that had been open were now blocked by shifting rocks or moving platforms. Water channels flowed unpredictably, and even the once trusted animals reacted nervously to the visitors' presence. The aliens had learned to be alert at all times, to notice every detail, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Ril and Vera took on greater responsibilities. They led small groups through the dangerous parts of the settlement, guiding them past moving hazards, predicting the changes the Deathworlders would make, and ensuring that food and water reached everyone. The younger aliens looked to them for guidance, and the elders watched closely, offering advice but allowing the youth to take the lead. In this harsh new environment, leadership was not about power. It was about courage, quick thinking, and the willingness to face fear alongside others. Each day, the Deathworlders introduced new challenges. Bridges that had once led safely over rivers now moved unpredictably, requiring careful timing to cross. Fields that had provided food were rearranged with obstacles and sudden gaps. Machines appeared that tested the aliens' intelligence, forcing them to solve puzzles under pressure or risk losing access to vital resources. At first, some aliens panicked and failed. But slowly, through observation, practice, and cooperation, they began to adapt. Success came from working together, sharing knowledge, and supporting one another through fear and uncertainty. The emotional strain was immense. Parents worried constantly for their children, and children feared the challenges that awaited them each day. Some young aliens struggled with confidence, unsure if they were strong or clever enough to survive. Yet moments of hope and courage appeared regularly, reminding the community of what they could endure. A small victory, crossing a dangerous river, repairing a vital machine, or finding hidden reserves, brought laughter, relief, and renewed determination. Even in the face of constant danger, life continued, and the aliens learned to find small joys amid trials. Riel noticed that understanding the Deathworlders' patterns was crucial. The visitors were not cruel in the human sense. They simply saw the universe as a series of tests, a place where strength and cleverness were valued above all else. This insight changed the aliens' approach. Instead of running from danger, they learned to observe, predict, and adapt. Teams were formed, each specializing in certain challenges. Some focused on navigating the moving obstacles, others on gathering and distributing food, while a few studied the machines, learning to solve puzzles quickly. The settlement became organized, efficient, and remarkably resilient. Vera worked closely with the younger aliens, teaching them patience and observation. She encouraged them to see each trial as a learning opportunity, rather than a threat. Slowly, the younger aliens gained confidence, discovering skills they had never known they possessed. They realized that fear could be a guide, not a barrier, and that helping one another was the surest path to survival. Bonds strengthened, and even those who had once doubted themselves found a sense of purpose and belonging. Yet challenges remained constant. One day, a section of the settlement was flooded with fast-moving water, forcing the aliens to find new paths or risk losing vital supplies. Panic spread quickly, but the teams worked together, moving carefully, using ropes and levers, and supporting one another across the dangerous area. Small mistakes were costly, but careful planning and cooperation ensured that most survived. These experiences taught the aliens to trust their instincts, rely on one another, and remain calm under pressure. Even with these victories, the emotional toll was heavy. Exhaustion, fear, and worry weighed on every heart. Riel and Vera understood that survival was not only about physical skill, it was about emotional strength, courage, and resilience. They organized quiet moments of rest, shared stories of past successes, and reminded the community of what they had already overcome. The aliens discovered that hope was not about wishing for rescue. It was about believing in their own ability to endure, adapt, and protect one another. The Deathworlders continued to observe silently, introducing new obstacles with precise timing. Their presence was constant, a reminder that the universe could be both magnificent and challenging. But the aliens had learned to face this presence not with fear, but with focus and determination. Each day became a test, a lesson, and an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more united. The community had become more than just a group of survivors. They had become a network of thinkers, learners, and protectors, bound by the trials they faced together. As the sun set each day, painting the sky with colors the aliens had once thought impossible, Riel and Vera looked over the settlement. Despite the challenges, they felt pride. The community had changed. They were no longer helpless. They had learned to adapt, to survive, and to find strength in each other. While the Deathworlders' trials were far from over, the aliens understood that they could endure anything as long as they remained united. The aliens had endured months of constant trials, facing challenges that tested every skill, strength, and courage they possessed. They had adapted to obstacles that seemed impossible, solved puzzles under pressure, and navigated dangerous terrain with intelligence and teamwork. The settlement, though still under the watchful eyes of the Deathworlders, had become a place of resilience, determination, and quiet hope. Yet even in these moments of triumph, the aliens knew that their journey was far from over. They had learned the most important lesson. Survival depended not on external help, but on unity, courage, and adaptability. Every trial had strengthened them, every obstacle had taught them, and every moment of fear had revealed their inner resilience. They now faced the future with eyes wide open, ready to meet any challenge that came next. Their world had changed forever, but so had they. In this new reality, the aliens were no longer helpless. They were prepared, determined, and capable. Rill stood atop a small hill, looking at the settlement below. He thought of the days when fear had ruled their lives, and of the small victories that had slowly built their confidence. He realized that they had learned more than just survival skills. They had discovered courage, trust, and the power of working together. Vera joined him, and together they watched the lights of the settlement, each glow a symbol of life, hope, and determination. As night fell, the aliens reflected on how far they had come. They had faced the unexpected, endured constant challenges, and adapted in ways they had never imagined. Though the Deathworlders still observed, still introduced trials, and still challenged them, the aliens had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. They understood that life would always include challenges, but that together they could face anything. With this understanding, the alien community found a fragile peace. They slept with the knowledge that they were no longer entirely at the mercy of the Deathworlders. Their hope was not blind, it was earned through courage, intelligence, and unity. They had cried for help, and though help had come in an unexpected form, it had taught them the greatest lesson of all, that survival, growth, and resilience came from within, and that their own strength was their most valuable ally.